hello, and welcome back to the Adventures in Advising podcast. Matt Markin here, along with Ryan Shekel, and I think we have a great episode, per usual, ahead of us today. And it's actually related to something remarkable going on across the University of Texas system. Ryan, there's always the question of how do we provide meaningful professional development to academic advisors? And sometimes the question is, how do you do that, not just in one department or one institution, but maybe across a whole system? What goes through your mind when you hear that?
Well, the idea that it takes a village, I know that phrase is a little bit of a meme or a trope or a cliche, but the reality is, especially with institutions of our complexity and size, the nature of the students that we're working with, sometimes a significant administrative buy-in and institutional or system-based approach might be the best strategy, especially when those strategies are flexible enough to be adopted at institutions and campuses and locations based on their sort of unique situation too. So I'm thrilled to have a party. We got 4 guests today and love hosting people, especially when we get to bring everybody together all at once. That's super cool too.
Yeah, so today's conversation, maybe we'll be able to kind of pull back the curtain a little bit on that system-wide effort, maybe how things came together, maybe what it's teaching us, where it's headed next. So we are thrilled to be joined by individuals who have shaped this work from vision to reality. So let's go ahead and bring our guests on at this time. And welcome, friends. We have Angie Barrera, Weston Rose, Dr. Heather Smith, and Dr. Rebecca Karoff. Welcome to Adventures in Advising.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Ryan. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And before we jump into all that fun and discussing all of that, I think it'll be great to kind of hear from each of you to tell us a little bit about your higher ed journeys and where you're at today. And I'll just kind of pick on someone and then we'll kind of go from there. Angie, you want to go first?
Sure. Well, again, thank you, Matt and Ryan, for having us today. My journey, wow, that's going to date me. I started my higher education journey actually when I was a grad student at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. I always was brought in to help our athletic trainers and our student athletes with scheduling, ensuring that we could make things happen. So I quickly found a passion in higher education, but quickly then looked at, my own personal journey. I got my first opportunity as an academic advisor at Texas A&M, which is where I actually started my education. But so from A&M, I quickly transitioned, not quickly, but I was recently married at the time and my husband couldn't find a job in the area. So we were living in 2 different cities. But from Texas A&M, I went back to Texas A&M Kingsville, transferred over, had a stint there, then landed at Texas A&M San Antonio, which was a systems school of Texas A&M Kingsville. Great opportunity. Years later came about at Texas State University. I was at Texas State University, and then I flew back to San Antonio, and I'm here at UT San Antonio, which is very hard for me to say, so I had to write it in that caption. But in that whole transition, academic advising has been my anchor. Whether I remained an academic advisor 1, 2, director, or executive director, or at AVP, academic advising has always been near and dear to my heart, and I always tell people I will never let it go. That's the true hat that I wear, and I enjoy it each and every day.
Wonderful. And I can definitely relate to that 2-city thing. Heather, how about you?
Well, I'm Heather Smith. I'm at the University of Texas in El Paso, UTEP, way out at the west tip of Texas, closer to San Diego than Houston. And I have been in advising my entire career kind of unexpectedly. I finished a degree and was going to become a literature professor. And somebody said, do you want to help advise athletes? I had no idea what that meant. So my very first job was being an advisor to advise athletes and help UTEP get out of a major infractions case back when the NCAA still cared about infractions. Anyway, so I was the advisor for student athletes. I helped build the first academic center for student athletes on the UTEP campus. and have been at UTEP for 28 years in June, and had all kinds of opportunities in the world of advising and student success to build and grow from the athletics piece into the general student population to provide access and opportunity to quality advising for our students. And that's what I do now, is oversee a campus-wide advising model that seeks to provide every student personalized advising from admissions to graduation. So yes, like Angie, advising is near and dear to my heart, and I will never give it up.
Awesome. So that's our continuing theme, seems like. So Rebecca, you're up next.
Thank you. And I'm really so pleased to be here. Thank you so much, Matt and Ryan. And also great to be in this virtual room with incredible colleagues from UTEP, UT San Antonio, and my own colleague, Weston Rose. I don't have a history in advising. But I do have a history of working in university system offices. And it's in some ways, most of my professional career has been spent in two systems of higher ed. But I started with a PhD in comparative literature. Like Heather, I thought I was going to be a faculty member, but I quickly decided for personal and professional reasons to sort of find ways to work in higher education administration. I worked for the University of Wisconsin system for 21 years in a variety of roles focused on student success and academic strength and faculty success. And then 10 years ago, I moved to the University of Texas system. And I will say, when I got to Texas, I was like, oh gosh, this state is big. And not only does it have one large university system like mine, which has, we have over 260,000 students right now in 13 institutions. It also has 6 other systems, including Ryan's at Texas Tech. So that kind of was mind blowing, just the kind of platform, the giantness of the environment, but also the opportunity. So I, as an Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs, I work on a lot of different student success initiatives, advising being one of my favorite, but also work on things like transfer, on open educational resources, on curricular redesign, on the faculty role in student success, and lots of other things. But I will say that one of the things for me is the opportunity we have in the University of Texas system across the state of Texas. It's a demographic opportunity. It's an opportunity to advance the lives and transform lives of our students, help them achieve intergenerational wealth, help them achieve that kind of social and economic mobility that I think we strive for. And while not a native Texan, I'm from Massachusetts originally. I love Texas public higher education. I can't imagine a more dynamic place to be doing the work we're doing.
Definitely hear the passion from not only you, Rebecca, but everyone else so far. And last but not least, Weston.
Hello, my name is Weston Rose, and I'm a senior program manager in the Office of Academic Affairs at the University of Texas System. I began my career at Sam Houston State University as an undergraduate. I was an undergraduate assistant in the Department of English, and actually one of my jobs was to help advise majors and minors. So students would come in, and as a first generation student, I hadn't even completed a degree, and I was helping people to navigate the higher education landscape. But after getting my master's degree, when I was working as an adjunct at SHSU, I also got a job working as an academic advisor. And I just really loved the job. It was one of my favorite jobs. So years later, when I joined UT System and started working with Rebecca on academic advising, it was just so fun to continue that good work.
Well, fantastic. Rebecca, I didn't grow up in Texas either. I was born in South Dakota, and one of the things that I learned along the way is I can tell people I wasn't born here, but I got here as soon as I could. That helps for the native Texans. And we're going to start with you, Rebecca. Just give us the sort of the lay of the land. What initially sparked the idea for the fundamentals of excellence in academic advising, the project, and what role did system leadership play in sustaining momentum and institutional buy-in for that work?
Thank you. Love that question. It's actually got a long 10-year history in terms of the answer. But I will say this. So I think the idea for the fundamentals in academic advising course came from our institutional colleagues and people in this room, but also elsewhere. And in some ways, the 10-year history includes, as a system person, and this also answers that second question about the system leadership, if you, in some ways, my job is all about building relationships, collaboration, and capacity and trust. And if I don't have trust and good relationships with people at the institutions, not much is going to happen. And so that's been something that I've been both, I think, proud of and just so grateful to all these incredible institutional colleagues who make that actually easy to do. So the fundamentals course is sort of, in some ways, the culmination, a real signature project for things that we've been doing for quite a while. And we have built, one of the goals we had early on was to really understand and understand advising as a profession that requires the kind of support, development, and nurturing that other professional identities have. So that was, I think, one of the major impetuses. But always we want to be responsive at the system level to our institutions, really listen to them. What do they need? What do what do we do to create that culture of collaboration? We can convene at the system level. We can provide some resources, and we have for advising, although not like millions of dollars, but sometimes just targeted pots of money go a very long way. So we've been really quite proud of what we've been able to do, using advising as one of the key levers for removing barriers in front of students as they try to progress through our institutions, ensuring clear pathways, and working very hard to close gaps in outcomes. So I'll stop there because I know we'll have some other questions that will also address some of the history of this particular project.
Basically giving us that foundation, and I like how you say trust, because that's going to be very important on how you build those collaborations. And it seems like that was something that was inputted in this, of course. Angie, I'm going to throw this question to you, because a lot of times we end up just seeing the final product, but talk to us about maybe how did this partnership between advising leaders, system leadership, and the learning experience, how did that influence with the final product?
Oh, they were all influential, but I also do want to add one population was our advising community, right? I think that was a consistent topic in our conversations, because we all sit on a council that Dr. Karoff has, and that was one of the consistent messages. I hope my colleagues, but I always tell them I speak as a practitioner in advising, that through the lens of an advisor, this is what we need to do and build. So it was extremely important that in building this module that we understood the needs of our advising community, but we also needed our campus leadership to be the voice, to help us with strategic planning, to help us understand the needs of each campus, because we're uniquely different, and we knew that we did not want to build a training that was part A, part B, part C with each of our campuses, but what can we bring together in this training with our students at the forefront of our work. So it was essential to have our advising leadership team members be able to provide us that information. I think one of the other essential pieces that we talked about, and I'm so glad that we were able to bring her to this team, was Maya. Her expertise. She was our learning experience designer. We just had so much feedback from her through our lens. So, because we were talking through our experience, right? Either our personal experience in advising or through the needs of what our leaders were telling us. But she was really able to morph our ideas and our story so that we had an engaging platform. So it was really, really, it was great conversations with her. And we all kind of looked at each other and were like, oh, we wouldn't have thought about that. So we were really, really happy that we were able to bring her to the team, because she really definitely changed the dynamic, changed our thinking as we were bringing together the curriculum that we were assigned. So each of us on the subcommittee volunteered or were voluntold different components that we decided were important in this module. And then, we worked together to bring all those topics and our thoughts and our, maybe personal experiences in order to achieve and bring together the curriculum for the module.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think folks at higher education institutions forget that they have experts in the project that they're thinking about starting that they could consult. And bringing in an instructional designer, especially when you're developing a course and modules and learning outcomes. I certainly know that's outside of my scope of expertise for sure. Rebecca, coming back to you, and learning about this project, I was wondering how the UT system's framing of advising as a core pillar alongside finances and belonging shape the vision for the learning module.
It did very much, and it really speaks in some ways to the history and that trajectory of where we are now to having this course that was built over the last several years, and then is now being offered to all professional advisors across the system. But we did, when I first got here, we didn't necessarily have a student success framework. And one of the things I did was convene affinity groups around what we did identify as 3 pillars: financial well-being, academic and social belonging, and advising, articulated as commitments to our students, and just convened about 65 institutional colleagues. Heather was a part of the work. Angie, I don't think you were. In Weston, you hadn't been hired yet, or maybe in the process of being hired. But just getting, again, that opportunity to listen to what do people need. So fine, and we have these pillars. How do you operationalize that? How do you operationalize what that commitment to students and advising looks like in a way that, building on something that Angie said, you can't have this one-size-fits-all approach to 9 academic universities and very different cultures, context, student populations. So we worked hard to think about what are the stepping blocks needed. In some ways, some of it was serendipitous. I won't say that we planned. We didn't do a backwards design that said in 8 or 9 years we're going to have an online set of modules for all advisors to take. But again, we did a lot of listening. We did a lot of building together. We convened several advising institutes as a means of providing professional development for our advisors. But one of the things about that was always you can't scale that professional development. Even if you end up with 100 people at the institute, you're still not scaling advising. So there was always that interest. How do we scale advising excellence? How do we make it sort of replicable, sustainable, and institutionalizable? Along the way, in these last several years, we developed something in response to the advising pillar. We developed a 5E framework for advising excellence. And I'm not going to get the 5 E's, but maybe one of my colleagues like elevate and educate, and I can't even remember. But it was just a very solid empower. Thank you. You'd think I would have these if I had. But so we had the 5E framework. That was probably 7 years ago. And then about 6 years ago, we said, well, okay, great. We have a framework. How do we know we're actually meeting, adhering and offering and ascribing and building capacity in each of those 5 aspects of excellence? So we designed a rubric, and this was all very collectively done. Angie referenced an academic advising leadership council, which has been convened in the last few years. And even before that, there were sort of predecessor groups with some of the same people. And we said, let's design a rubric. That was actually a paid 1-year project that we were able to stipend leaders of that work, including Heather and professional advisors and advising leaders, to say, let's develop a rubric that helps us self-assess, informative, not punitive or summative ways, how we're doing in that regard. That rubric is now an annual survey that we give at each of our institutions to advisors to sort of say, let's self-assess again for continuous improvement purposes, not punitive, and it's sort of at an institutional level. It's not about individual advisors. So from the rubric, we then realize we're still not hitting the scale we want. We're still not providing some of that sort of system-wide shared valued and shared responsibility sort of professional development that we were still aspiring to. And the idea was launched for the modules project. And that has been, I think, really very powerful. And I'll stop there because I know my colleagues will be able to describe a little bit in greater detail what the fundamentals course is like, how it was developed, the collaborative development process and all that. And it was a couple-year process. Again, we were able to provide some funding to the leaders of it, but it went on way longer than anyone wanted. And I was just so grateful that in some ways the people on the development team they couldn't be done. They were like, wait, we're not done. We're like, oh, it's probably great. And like, no, we got to keep meeting. We know it's past the time, the funded period, all that other stuff, but the dedication to providing this incredibly strong program was really phenomenal.
Yeah, sometimes it takes that little bit of extra time, but you brought people to the table, you asked questions, you listened. Weston, I want to bring you in. We've been hearing about partnerships and collaboration. How did cross-institutional collaboration, how did that look like in actual practice when you're developing these modules, and what do you feel has made it successful?
Well, in practice, cross-institutional collaboration for our project was iterative, and it involved many conversations and thoughtful approaches from our team members. But I think what made it successful was the individual strengths that each of our team members brought to the table. Angie alluded to our instructional designer, Maya, all of her expertise. But Angie also brought a ton of a wealth of knowledge as a leader in academic advising in Texas. And Heather likewise brought so much to the table. She had worked on developing the academic advising rubric, which is part of our work. And she had been through this exercise working with academic advisors to revise that and get it correct. So we sort of had a template in a way of how to run a group like this. But I will say that we've mentioned the Academic Advising Leadership Council at UT System. These are advising leaders across our 9 academic institutions, and we sourced our working group members from that group. So we had representation from UT Austin, UT Dallas, UTEP, and UT San Antonio. And what we did was we met, we did a kickoff meeting in January 2024, where we came together, we drafted community agreements on how to best work together. We scoped the number and purpose of each module, and we just came up with our project plan. And then we met monthly for an hour and a half virtually to keep the work on track. But we also strategically scheduled about 4 in-person meetings, 2 in Austin, 1 in El Paso, and 1 in San Antonio, so that we could come together, supercharge the work. It was really important to be in the same physical space because a lot of our team members are very important on their campuses. So it's really good for them to be able to step out of that daily grind and for all of us to come together and have those rich conversations to develop that curriculum.
Yeah, I know the nature of our conversation today is going to be a lot more process oriented, and there's going to be a lot to think about and consider. Just thinking about how does it go from an idea to something that's actually implemented. But for our listeners and viewers out there, I really encourage you to check out the rubric. Lots to chew on in there. Just we could talk on any one of those line items. I saw one in particular that's like, oh, we were just talking about that the other day. But Heather, I want to ask you in sort of more of a general sense, what have y'all done to balance, because I know consistency across the system is a goal, but also maintaining a flexibility for advisors who might have those very different institutional contexts. What have y'all done to try to reach that balance?
So throughout the process, we talked a lot about that in our Advising Leadership Council amongst ourselves with Rebecca, that as we mentioned earlier, our institutions are very different and serve a variety of demographics and are different sizes and all across this fabulous large state of Texas. But it was important for us to establish a shared set of values about what advising excellence was and what it would mean to be an advisor in the UT system, whether you were at UTEP, UT San Antonio, Austin, our flagship, or UTRGV. And so we worked through the rubric, understanding, as Rebecca mentioned, we did that survey. We turned it into a survey because you can imagine when we initially implemented the rubric, there was a little bit of anxiety and angst about how is this going to be used and so on. And so we turned it into this survey, which has provided us valuable feedback about what is happening on our campuses and trends and so on. And that's where this professional development interest, I mean, it was just that was top of mind all the time from our advisors. And so, as Angie mentioned, we talked to our advisors on our campuses, and we talked amongst the leaders. We talked amongst our leadership council about what were the fundamental values that we could say are shared across the system, no matter where we are, what city, what campus, to ensure that if you are an advisor in the UT system, this is what you would want to know, need to know, what we would hope you would know, to be an excellent advisor and to continue developing professionally.
Just think about it. So much work and so many conversations that had to be had up until this point. So Angie, kind of going back to you, now let's say we're at the launch process. What did that look like across the UT system, and anything that was learned early on?
Oh, definitely. I would say before the launch, early on, our biggest conversation was we need to pilot this to a group of individuals before a launch, right? Because we've been in our little rabbit hole developing, whether it be monthly or in our great visits on our campuses. But we wanted to make sure that we were actually creating what we were thinking about. So we needed other lenses in there. And so what we did is that we went back to our council and we asked our advising leaders to identify, and we gave them X amount of number of slots to identify advisors, and we wanted our advisors to pilot this. And so we set out the pilot in this past summer. So we piloted out. We had decided we were going to do about 2 weeks. Of course, we know orientation's going on. We knew we were going to have to deal with that gamut, but there is no downtime for advising. We knew that, but we had our target. We wanted our goals. And so we were able to extend that. So we had a 3-week opportunity. We sent out the modules to 50 participants across all of our institutions. And then we got, our return was, we had 46 completed. So we had a 92% completion rate. And with that 92%, with those 46 people who did everything we asked them to, we had great feedback. The good, the bad, the ugly. Like the things that we were thinking were working great, but we didn't think of some other things. So we took all of that information from July. So we had September, July, we had August to try to turn those things around. And we did. We worked really hard to utilize that feedback and then to deliver the things that the advisors told us, like they wanted clarity, they wanted additional case studies, or maybe something wasn't working for a specific advisor. In addition to that, we gave the advisors an opportunity with that feedback to say, hey, is there something you want to tell us that have sat down and created this? And we did have some advisors who said, yes, we want to speak to you. And we thought, oh, okay, what did we just open? But again, so we had a small focus group. We came to the table, we talked to them, and it was all positive feedback. Really, it was thanking us for taking the time to do this. Thank you for allowing their voice in there. And so it was a really unique opportunity for us to utilize that information to go in to make adjustments. And then we still hit our target. We launched it September 16th of 2025. We issued an email out to all of our advising leadership. So this is how it rolled out. We sent the information about the module and its access to all of our advising leadership leaders across of our campuses. Then they had their plan of action on how they were going to launch it to their team and their community. So it was their autonomy to do and launch that how they wanted to. What we have been doing to help them out is that we have been following up so we can see how many people have started. We do see how many people have completed. And then Weston and I and Maya meet to discuss that. We provide that data to the council or individuals who sit on that leadership team in case they want to, spark conversation with their community or give them kudos for having X amount of these modules done. One thing I don't think we mentioned is in this year, we're giving every advisor, whoever we deemed advisor in our advising community, the opportunity to go through this module. So it didn't matter if you were in year 1 or year 25. You have access to this module, and you can provide us feedback. One of the things that we did see, as we do have turnover in our institutions, nationwide, we saw some lagging in our institutions that had some leadership. So then Weston and I stepped in to offer, some guidance to say, hey, we've noticed that your numbers aren't quite where some of the other ones are. Would you like us to meet with your advising community? And so we have had people say, actually, yes, please come in and talk to our community. And so we're able to do that and engage. We are paying attention to the numbers, and we're getting the feedback that we want, and hopefully we'll be able to do some more with that feedback.
It's fantastic. I am also reminded that not only do we have experts at our institutions and in our communities for the projects we have in mind, but we're also learning institutions, and we can start small and scale up and share our results. And speaking of results, I know Angie talked a little bit about some of the numbers, but Weston, how are people doing? What have been the results so far? Are there any other metrics that y'all are watching most closely, or why are you focusing on the things that you're focusing on?
Absolutely. So we looked at the data, and as of January 14th, 2026, there are 254 enrollments in our modules, which represents about 35% of the advisor population system-wide. There are over 700 advisors, about 720 across our system. So of those, of the 9 academic institutions in our system, we have participants from 8 of the institutions. As Angie said, in year 1, we provided the modules and we gave advising leaders the discretion to launch them with their advising population during the optimal time that worked for them. So it's not surprising that we don't have 100% of our institutions just yet, and they do have a year to complete it. But I did want to point out that one of the goals of this was to make sure that advisors walked away with something, and we developed a micro-credential. So when people complete our modules, they have a digital badge that is run in a third party that people can refer back to the skills they've learned. They can put it on their resume or LinkedIn profile. And so far, we've issued 92 micro-credentials, which we're really proud of. I think that some of my colleagues mentioned the advising rubric survey. This is a survey that we launched in 2024, and we've made an annual survey. So I do want to say that the advising rubric is grounded in NACADA's core principles. It's also grounded in the CAS standards. And many thanks to our colleagues, Heather Smith and Cassandra Alvarado, for spearheading that work. But I want to say that for our annual survey, in year 1, 2024, we had 269 respondents, which is 37% of our advisor population system-wide. That increased in 2025 to 294 respondents, or 40% of our advisor population. And when we look at the survey results, what we're seeing is that 60% of our advisors report that advising is required for all or most students at their institution. Also, 84% of advisors are telling us that students have an assigned advisor. Additionally, 90% of advisors are telling us that they customize advising to meet students where they are. And I'd like to point out just a few other statistics. So 81% of advisors tell us that they do complete comprehensive training that is grounded in standards like student development theory. That's compared to 76% from 2024. So we're up 5 percentage points. So it's good to see that incremental but positive progress. And it's probably attributed a lot to the rollout of these modules. We've piloted it with academic advisors. We've talked to their managers. So we're really doing, I think, a good job of socializing the training that we're making available. Conversely, in 2024, 24% of advisors told us that training is largely non-standard or not available to all advisors at their institution. But as of last year, that number was down by 5 percentage points. So only 19% of advisors are telling us that now. And finally, 82% of advisors tell us that they have opportunities to participate in formal professional development annually and are encouraged to do so, which is up from 77% the year before. So we're seeing some good trends. It's a lot of work, but we are seeing progress.
Well, that is really, really amazing to hear. And I would imagine too, there's maybe some surprises from maybe the feedback that you're getting. Heather, I want to ask you this, like, there's the pilot launch, there's the September 2025 launch. I mean, since the launch and hearing about all this feedback from advisors, has anything surprised you? Has anything affirmed anything that was in that feedback?
I think I'll talk about affirmed first, because we kept hearing from our advisors that they wanted training and they wanted professional development. And as Rebecca mentioned, we can't scale an in-person for 700 and some advisors across the system, but advisors kept asking for it and asking for it. So I feel very affirmed that we launched this, and so many institutions and advisors have already enrolled, and many of them have already completed the micro badge, the credential for the online modules, and that's important. I think surprise, advisors always talk about, I mean, we always know there's never a good time for anything in the world of advising. I mean, you move from one thing to the next, and it's nonstop. And I think that what has surprised me is initially working with advisors through the rubric development, and then through listening to some of their feedback through this, there was initially we're fatigued on, a variety of things. We're burnt out on all of these. I mean, anybody who's in advising knows that it's always on campus. If something needs to get done and nobody knows who to hand it to, it's like, well, the advisors could do this. Can the advisors do that? The advisors surely can give us this. And so initially we heard from advisors, how are we going to have time to do this? Are our supervisors going to give us time to do this? Will we be able to make time? And that has surprised me that people have been on it. People have made time to do it. Supervisors have given their advising communities and staffs time to do it. And that's been good. And it's been important for us to take that feedback. So for instance, for the advising leadership, I think what has been affirming for me is we gave everybody the opportunity to launch this year according to their own calendar and workload and so forth, and to pivot when necessary. And so out of the 9 institutions, my institution is the one that has not yet enrolled. And that is due to the fact that we had 14 vacancies in the fall unexpectedly across our 7 colleges. And the advising leaders here said, hey, we can't do this in the fall. Please, can we got to hire advisors. And so we shifted the launch for us for the professional development to the spring, because we had to cover 14 vacancies. So all of that has been good. It's a lot of affirmation and a lot of surprises for how much space our advisors will make in their schedules to further develop themselves for things like this. It's been good.
Yeah, I happened to live with an advisor, and I was talking with her last night about the black box of advising. It's like, I'm sure if we put something in there, something will come out of it. And it's understanding that black box is, I don't know, maybe where my brain is going next. Coming back to Weston, and as we start sort of moving into these sort of perspectives on your experience as individuals, institutions, and as a system, Weston, what advice would you give to other systems or multi-campus institutions who are thinking about doing this sort of thing, trying to lead a transformation in advising at scale? What would you recommend?
I think that the most important takeaway that we learned from this project was that developing e-learning modules for academic advisors, professional development, is customizable and scalable for your institution or your university system. In terms of advice that I would give, I would say assemble the right team. You likely need advising managers to serve as subject matter experts, but also an instructional designer is really critical to help shape the learning modules from the beginning, help to write those learning objectives. And also for us, we found a project manager, especially in a system level project, was very critical, because you need someone to handle all of the administrative work, schedule meetings, make sure that we're meeting those milestones. Another thing that really worked for our team was having 2 co-leads for the project. So we had someone at the system, myself, as well as Angie, who's from UT San Antonio. And that was just really helpful, because if one of us, was really busy, the other person could pick up the slack. And it really kept the momentum of the project going forward. Another piece of advice I would give in terms of developing content or curriculum would be to identify what are advising community best practices versus what is a specific institutional policy. And this is where NACADA's pillars of academic advising and its clearinghouse with helpful articles became so beneficial to us. In terms of contact, I would also say adhere to the Goldilocks principle. So you don't want too much content or too little. And for us, it was important to make sure that our content was engaging. So we tried to avoid text-heavy sections in favor of videos and interactive elements like flip cards, matching exercises, accordions, things like that. Another important piece of advice would be to understand the commitment this project requires and to establish a realistic timeline. We thought we would need a year for the project, but actually we needed a year and a half. And while this project was so much fun to work on and I loved every minute of it, it was very hard work. And our working group was made up of very busy people. They're vital on their campuses and they're often pulled away for another important meeting. So it's very important to just realize that the work will probably take longer than you may originally think. This next piece of advice is maybe not revelatory, but I would say design the instruction backwards. We started by thinking about what was the knowledge and the skills that any academic advisor would need. And then we developed the learning outcomes from there, and we worked backwards in an iterative way to design the curriculum. My second to last piece of advice would be to develop multiple feedback loops. For us, when we were developing the curriculum, we might run into questions or we might have a debate among ourselves. And then we would take it back to our Academic Advising Leadership Council to clarify certain questions that we ran into. Another way that we developed a feedback loop was by doing a 50-person pilot with academic advisors across our institutions to get their input on the modules, the prototype that we had created. And we also have another way for them to provide feedback whenever someone takes one of our modules. There's a survey at the end of it, now that we've launched the modules, that they can give us feedback there too. And my final piece of advice is to expect the unexpected. From the beginning, we always wanted to make sure that academic advisors who completed these e-learning modules would receive a micro-credential. But right before we were going to launch the program, we learned that from UT San Antonio that the LMS Canvas might not be able to provide Canvas credentials, which is how we would provide those micro-credentials. It turned out that that might not be the case, so we were able to launch in September 2025. But then later in December, just last month, we did learn that Canvas is discontinuing its Canvas credentials. So now our academic advisors who have completed the modules after January 1st are in this limbo period where they've completed the module, and until UT San Antonio identifies a new vendor for micro-credentials, they won't be able to receive those. But once UT San Antonio's task force decides on that vendor, we will be able to back issue it. So, just remember that when you're working on this project, anything can happen, expect the unexpected. And I think that's a really helpful piece of advice to anyone going forward.
Yeah, hard to predict the future, but this kind of goes into a question I have for Rebecca, or maybe your thoughts on and your vision, if you had a crystal ball, from a system-wide level with the advising work at UT. What's next? Do you see the fundamentals of excellence evolving? Does this help with laying the groundwork for future initiatives?
Absolutely. The crystal ball, I will look into the crystal ball, meaning I will look to all my institutional people here in this room and on our advising leadership council, because that's where we don't have students at system, but we get to again work with the all these leaders across the system and advising in other areas as well to help guide us. But I think in terms of where the fundamentals of excellence in modules and advising training will go, one thing in this launch here, we were very clear that we wanted to try to have, as Weston mentioned, 720 advisors take this at all our institutions, even if they've been, even if they're seasoned advisors, have been in the profession for a while. moving forward, we expect that new advisors will take it, and then we'll open it up if others want to repeat the course or feel like they need some additional development or training in particular module topics. So we don't expect to. So we're trying to achieve scale, but we know that those numbers should go down each year. And this course was always designed to supplement what the very campus-specific training that all advisors, of course, receive. So we have to be mindful always of like, if you step back and think, what's that sort of system-wide culture of advising excellence and shared responsibility that these individual modules that are very focused on the advising profession and portfolios of, the work that advisors do, how might that evolve? Some future, we can imagine perhaps, well, I don't know if Angie and Heather and Weston would say they could imagine, but I can imagine adding some additional modules, perhaps more specific kind of modules focused on career advising, focused on AI and advising, something that Weston's been interested in, focused on something like transfer advising, because Ryan knows this, the state of Texas has a lot of transfer challenges with its 7 university systems, 50 independent community college districts, et cetera. And we noticed that the advisors who are helping transfer students have those more seamless pathways into and through institutions have some particular set of challenges. So we can imagine additional modules, but doing that will be complex. We're going to need who's developing those modules. We want the advising leaders that have been at the table, as Weston mentioned, the institutional leaders helping develop the content of the curriculum. We want the instructional design support that Maya at UT San Antonio has provided. And Weston referenced this unit, this division at UT San Antonio called Academic Innovation. They've had, in addition to sort of instructional design, digital learning, and all that expertise, they also have these technology, platforms that they've been able to make it available to us. And we hope, and that's been through a partnership, and we've been able to, be able to pay UT San Antonio, which we absolutely need to do for what has been a whole lot of work. We hope we can continue that kind of partnership, but it speaks to what we might be able to do in the future in other ways with this course. It's possible that we've talked about, I don't know if it's it'll have some delivery complications, but imagine, we've heard from other systems, other advisors across the state, could our advisors take this kind of course? Now, ours is keyed, as you've heard, to our advising excellence rubric and to a UT system culture, but there's certainly some, given that it's grounded in the work of NACADA and the CAS standards, of course there would be, I think, really good content and information for any advisor anywhere. So that's something we could think about. We've been asked about that. We also have health institutions in our system, in addition to the 9 academic universities we've mentioned. They have fewer students as a rule. The majority of undergraduates are at the academic institutions, and even the majority of graduate students. But we might consider some work and support for advisors at health institutions if that would be meaningful to them. Again, at the system level, we will listen and hear. The other thing I'll say is that because we've done this partnership, this kind of creation of an entire course with our institutions based on institutional expertise and leadership and the advising community and profession, we know there are other areas that are interested in developing online modules and getting credentials. One of the areas is developmental education and co-requisite education. That's another initiative that some of us are involved in and led by another one of my colleagues here at System. That's work we are considering right now. I think there's some partners involved in thinking about what kind of professional development do we need to do for instructors, faculty, and others who are teaching developmental education and co-requisite teachings, because that is an area across the country, but certainly in Texas, we have a lot of students who are coming in who are not, I don't love the term, but not, college ready in terms of math and writing and reading. So we know that that's an area. So this whole project has real replicability in other areas and other dimensions of student success. So that's the kind of thing we do. The other thing I will just say, this emphasis on advising excellence and elevating the profession has really fed into some of the other student success work that I've been a part of. We have a major grant funded project. We're actually just launching phase 2 with additional grant support around curricular redesign. And we've funded over the last 4 years 22 projects at our institutions focused on very data informed curricular redesign with teams and cohorts. Those projects, whether you're doing a sort of gateway course redesign or entire major redesign, the role of advisors in those projects has been critical. And projects where some of those projects where they're not talking to their advisors, it's sort of like, hello, people, you're missing this core group of insight and expertise that are going to help you understand how your students are moving through your curriculum, your major, your gateway courses, or in some cases, not moving through. And that's what we're trying to interrupt, the students who stop out, the students who are not successful. And that's on us. And we're trying to figure out in other ways. So this whole project, I think, has just really served its original purpose, which is to elevate the advising profession and ensure that every student receives effective advising so that they can be successful in college and beyond. So there's a lot of ideas we have. Sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomachs or whatever the expression is. So we won't be able to do all of this. And one thing I will just add at the system level, I'm very mindful of the inadvertent pressure and demands we put on institutional leaders like Heather and like Angie to sort of say, hey, want to be a part of this next incredible initiative. And this isn't the only initiative that these people are involved with. So we're very mindful of their capacity, their bandwidth, and just want to do everything we can at the system level to make sure we're being responsive to institutions, their students, and how we support the people.
I love that the idea of trying to balance the bold courage of these new initiatives and opportunities to innovate with the consideration for those involved. But I also love that advising has taken to the forefront in some ways and may have set a standard for what might be thought of as other disciplines at institutions to say maybe we could do something like that too. Angie, I want to come back to you. You mentioned the practitioner perspective and always being centered there. And I'm just kind of curious, what has this project changed about how you personally think about advising and leadership and collaboration?
The project has reaffirmed my belief in advising, the importance of advising. I think now we have so much more data that shows the impact that academic advising has on our students. But with this project, what this reaffirms is that we need to continue to invest in our advisors. I've always said a well-trained advisor is a better advisor for a student. An advisor who feels like we've invested in them and their education then brings that right to the students that they're serving. So I think this project just reaffirms all that. Was it easy? Absolutely not. Was it worth all the work? Absolutely. And we're going to continue the work, whatever extra projects come off of this, even though we are busy people, as we've all said that, we're all steered with our commitment and our passion to students. I think some of the other pieces that, as we think about in our, what our leadership is, we continue to have to tell the story. So the things that we're learning, the data that we have, it's pivotal that we bring that information back to our leadership. We definitely have had support from the UT system and ensuring that, we're moving these projects forward, but it's just as important for our institutions to understand, to recognize, and to have that information. Because we continue to evolve, we continue to grow, and the planting of the seeds. I love the planting of the seeds. I want a mid-management module. I want a module to teach advisors how to, to put proposals together. Those are all pivotal pieces that I used to have in one of my programs. And if you can teach your team to do this, then, I always say, I'm giving you the seed. Now you've got to seed the next generation. So we'll continue doing that with our capabilities, but we learned so much. We also, I feel like this group who came together to work on these modules, I feel like, the collaboration, I feel like I can pick up the phone and call any of my colleagues. Whether if it's for something, for my institution or for me personally, we have done a lot of thinking together, a lot of, eating together. But that has just made us better individuals. We've become better listeners at the same time with listening to unique situations of institutions. We said we're different in sizes, but that doesn't mean that we don't have things that we can share or help, someone think outside of the box just because they're a little stuck. So that's what we're here for now. And we have a great network of individuals. And I look forward to the work that we'll continue to bring.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have many advisors that are like, wow, the system actually cares about us and our development. And Heather, let me ask you a crystal ball question. Let's say it's 3 years from now. What are you hoping we're talking about regarding the impact that you all are doing with your work?
3 years from now, I'm hoping we're talking about two key elements of the 5E framework. Elevate, we set out both on my campus and on other campuses and system-wide a decade ago to elevate the profession of advising so that advisors would have the respect on their campuses and in the system that the job, I think, deserves, to enhance and elevate their career pathways and to really give them the opportunity to understand their contribution to student success and what an important piece of student success advising is. So elevate, definitely that our advisors would feel like their career pathways and their positions have been elevated. And then the other piece is enhancing the student experience. So enhancing, many advising interactions are still very transactional. And the goal is that we develop advisors who have the space then to develop relationships and rapport with students to help guide them through decision making and really improve the interactions between students and their advisors. And so those are the things that in 3 years, if we've had any impact, I hope that's what they are.
Fantastic. And to wrap up, I have a question for each of you. Higher ed can be a stressful time at many times during the year, overlapping priorities, a lot of roles and responsibilities. What do each of you do for your wellness?
Well, I'll jump in here. One thing that I love to do, I would say two things. One thing I love to do is listen to podcasts. That's actually how I came across Adventures in Advising, and I've really enjoyed listening to you guys. I also would say that another way that I sort of de-stress and focus on my wellness is by playing pickleball. It's a new passion of mine for the past 2 years.
I'll jump in and say I struggle. I have a big problem with this. Somebody just told me I needed to learn about work-life balance. But I love to read. I still love to read good old-fashioned books. So I read a lot. And I love to travel. And so I always am looking for what's the next thing, even though I don't always give myself the space. But I love to read and I love to spin class.
Go ahead, Angie. Go ahead.
I would say right now my commitment is to try to put myself first. So I've had to talk to my family about when I come home and I don't say anything, I may go to my room. That's just a little bit of me time, that decompression time. Listening to music really helps me relax in different types. Like if I need motivation or if I need to wind down, music has been my focus. And then one of my other goals is just getting out, just outside. Just, if it's walking around or just taking the dog for a walk, just a little bit more focus on me. I too am guilty of the work-life balance, but definitely it just that focus on understanding that we have to prioritize ourselves in order for us to continue to give.
I'll add to some of that. I find there's so much noise out there, and actually it's very hard to tune the news out right now. So I work hard on that. I don't have the best work-life balance for lots of reasons, but I do always prioritize reading like Heather. And I sometimes I'm a little embarrassed, but no, I just have to claim it. Despite having a PhD in comparative literature and writing a dissertation on Proust, decades ago, I now spend an inordinate amount of time reading romances. And it's like I can gobble them up. I read fast. I love them. I also read very good literature too that's out there, new fiction, mostly fiction. But I just sort of love the romances because they are formulaic they have all the same tropes, and I love that. And they have happy endings. And right now, I need happy endings. So, so that's how I spend my free time. And it's like, I think it's very therapeutic.
Yeah, and I think we've ended on a happy note with this podcast episode. So thank you all for sharing about that, as well as all the great work that you all are doing. So Rebecca, Angie, Heather, Weston, thank you for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you so much, Matt and Ryan, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.